Offset red dots and offset iron sights have been gaining in popularity for the past couple years. And there's a few reasons for this. The big one is obviously there's more options on the market. There's more miniature red dots, there's more companies manufacturing the mounts, and there's also more companies manufacturing the iron sights. But there's another reason a lot of people haven't noticed, which is there's more video games and more films that are starting to show offset mounts as something that is normal. But the real big question out there is, are offset mounts fast? Are they a viable option? Are they something that we should be putting on their guns? And can they be just as fast as a red dot? So something I started looking into a couple years ago is treating an offset red dot as a primary optic and not so much as a backup like so many people have been doing. They've been around for the past few years, 5 years, 10 years. Guys have been putting them on DMRs mainly as a backup or mainly as just something to be used up close. But I was thinking, well, why not use it as a primary optic instead of relying on my 1:6, having to use it on 1 power. So I started playing around with offset mounts and realized that something else needed to be designed. So let's kind of get into talking about, well, basically everything. So obviously you've got offset iron sights that a lot of people have been putting on their guns, and they are a good solution. They are a very good option. This is a set of Buick Defense sights. The only issue with some of these sights is they can become very expensive. These are $280 or so for a set. So when you start looking at a price like that for a good set of irons, like the Knights Armament offsets or the Buick Defense or some of the other ones out there, we're paying $250 plus. It's like, well, at that point, maybe I should just get a red dot. So what I was really thinking is, because I was running offset irons at the time on some of my LPVO, 1:6 guns, is I want to have a red dot that's faster, because these guys, I'm already rolling the gun over. I'm still having to line up two things now, like traditional iron sights, which we've obviously moved away from on our carbines for the past while. So I thought, well, I want a red dot. So I started buying different mounts, and there were a few issues across the board. I have some extras that I don't have here with me, where they would be at such a sharp angle that I was having to turn the gun a lot and then obviously flare this arm out and start chicken winging a lot. They also sat really low to the gun, so I was really having to bury my head into the stock. And with Ear Pro, because I wear over-ear hearing protection, that obviously is going to break a seal, and then I'm not getting good hearing, good protection as I shoot. I shoot a lot, and so obviously you want to avoid that. So I started thinking, well, I need to design something a little different. So what we came up with is an offset mount that has a much less harsh angle. But the big thing about this mount is I realized we needed to get the optic higher on the gun so that my head is more upright and less dug into the stock. So what we have with this offset mount, and we didn't make a fancy name for this, so we didn't give it some crazy acronym or name, it's just the T-Rex Arms offset mount, because we're probably only going to make one model, is we have a little riser plate that's interchangeable that I can add or remove to get this optic higher on the gun. The other nice thing with this is when I start running a taller scope like this 1:6 on a ScalarWorks 193, I now can match the same plane of the scope with the offset itself. So I can maintain consistent head placement as I'm shooting with the weapon. So obviously consistency is everything once you start shooting fast and once you obviously want to shoot accurately. So I don't want to be having to bury my head down like I was doing with some of these other mounts while I'm in the process of shooting. I want to be able to leave my head in the same spot as I rotate the gun, and I'm good to go. So I want to walk you through a few setups that I have here. Obviously, people are going to ask, well, why not just run a magnifier like on this MCX? Magnifiers are definitely, and especially with 2020 this year, I just edited the video, but whatever, they're becoming much more viable because the technology there is also getting better as well. EOTech now has a 5 power. I haven't used it yet, but looks pretty cool. And all these other companies are now making 3 buys. They're even smaller than this G33. So magnifiers and red dots absolutely still a very viable option. I'll make a video on that. But for now, we're talking offsets. So I have here an MCX with an ACOG. ACOGs are obviously something that are starting to get a little more dated, but I still really like them for a few reasons. And obviously, one of the early versions of like an offset red dot or a piggyback red dot was when guys were running ACOGs with the RMRs on top. One issue with this, it's still a decent setup, but the main issue with this is the optic is now so tall you're having to take your head off the gun. So problems there is your point of aim and your consistent placement of this dot on target is a little trickier, but you're also removing your head from the gun, another point of contact. So as the gun is recoiling, what you can get is a lot of flip back here in the rear of the stock, and that obviously is going to translate to your optic and your sight picture not coming back on target as consistently. So for me, I like going with an offset because I can still have some head on the gun, another point of contact, and it does help some with recoil management. So moving on, obviously this MCX we already talked about. It's got a Kahles, however you want to pronounce it, on a 193, and then I have a Delta Point with the riser installed. Some of you guys are going to ask, you know, offset in front or behind the gun. So this is going to come down to personal preference. I recommend you try both. One thing to take into account is depending on your scope and your whatever it's called, ring thingy to help turn and magnify the optic, that can get in the way of the optic. So obviously with this one, it's a very small little nubbin, so not as much of an issue. But one thing that I found is, one thing about raising this optic up is it's important to be able to see around your optic, especially when you're target transitioning and just keeping your field of view open. So by running this all the way back here, you're having to hunt through the glass for targets. And obviously with some optics like the RMR, they're still very blue. This is an RMO6. And so I don't really like having to look through all that blue when I'm looking for targets. So I prefer running my offsets further out so I can see more around them. And then I just put the optic on the target when I need to. So I prefer running them forward. That also allows me to interchange my optics and nothing is going to happen with the placement of this optic. Which, for one example, I have this 10-3 right here, which you guys will see more of, but I have an EOTech here up in the front, obviously on the upper receiver, and have a Delta Point up here in front. Some people go, ooh, that looks really weird, looks really odd. It is, sure. But the one reason for this is on this particular gun, this 10-3, I switch out my optics a lot. But rather than switching this out with a, you know, constantly and having to re-zero, I just leave this guy. I can add my razor, remove my razor, add a different scope that I'm testing, add an ACOG, add whatever I want, and this guy can just hang out and stay here. And as far as I'm concerned, this is kind of a backup if this optic happens to go down. But there's other advantages actually to running an offset red dot, even if I have a primary red dot at 12 o'clock, but more on that later. Moving on, this is obviously more of a competition. This is my 3-gun kind of rifle. I don't shoot a lot of 3-gun, but it is kind of what I use for that. I have a SRO up here, and I have an Absolute Co-Witness razor on a 157 mount, ScalarWorks, whatever. And I'm still running the riser plate. One reason for this is I like maintaining, obviously, height with my head on the gun. It does mean that my consistent sight picture is off a little bit because, you know, my head's down here finding the scope reticle. Once I turn, I have to bring my head up slightly, but it also allows me to kind of see over the scope with my left eye while my right eye actually finds the dot. So just something to play with. You can also remove the plate, bring the optic down, and now you're back to the same plane for turning the gun. And since our angle for the optic itself isn't a full like 45 or even 50 degrees, like some of the offsets out there, you're not having to turn the gun a whole lot to get on it. So you really can treat it as a primary optic, bring it up, and you're good to go. So obviously one of the things I was most interested in is the offset going to be faster than a standard red dot? So I have an EOTech EXPS3 on a lower third setup on this 10.3 gun, and I also have a Delta Point set up here on the side. And people have seen me running this setup for the past year or so, and they've asked, why do you have 2 red dots? Well, there's a couple reasons for that. One, sometimes I'm putting a magnified optic here on my upper receiver, and then I take it off to put a red dot on, and rather than taking this off and re-zeroing and doing all that rubbish, I just leave it on the gun. But the other thing this can let me do is if I am moving from right to left, it's actually easier to shoot with this offset than it is to shoot with the EOTech straight up and down. Or if I'm shooting around the left side of a barrier, rather than trying to keep the gun perfectly straight like this, it's actually easier to just angle the gun like so and have the red dot. So there are benefits to running an offset even if you are running a standard red dot. And this is something I've run into training some of the mill guys that I've worked with, where I'll actually see the same kind of setup. An MRDS out here, and it's because they're dropping their LCAN on or their whatever optic. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna do a little headshot standard, my headshot standard from 5 yards in under half a second from low ready. We're gonna do it with the EOTech, and then we're gonna do it with the Delta Point, see what the times are, make sure that we're clearing that in under half a second from low ready with both of these optics. So let's start with the EOTech. 5 yards. All right, so that's my first headshot, and that's in 4.2. The EOTech. Stand by. That's low left. That's in a 4.3. For some reason, my timer is showing 2. Stand by. Center. That's in 4.5. Stand by. That was in a, whoo boy, that was in a 3.6. Not bad. The beginning was right here, but these guys were good to go. All in under 5. So now let's go Delta Point. Stand by. First shot in 4.4, and it's in. Stand by. 4.2. It's actually easier. Stand by. Then that one was in a 4.4, and those are all 3 in. We got boom, boom, boom. Six shots, 1.25 with the EOTech, 7 yards. Better group and faster, 1.15. One of the reasons for that is I have more head on the gun. I'm really getting more cheek on it, and I'm really rolling the gun into me so I can control it a little better. Do it again. EOTech. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. 6 alphas with the EOTech. That is in 1.29. That was in high ready, 1.29. So let's talk about how these mounts are packaged. So obviously you can head over to our website and you can pick these up. We're currently making them for the RMR, the Delta Point, and the Aim Point. Obviously there's other models that may come down the road. I'm kind of dating this video, but a couple things to keep in mind. The Delta Point is fully ambidextrous. I can flip it to the other side of the gun if you're a lefty. I do recommend, if you want to play with rotating the gun this way as opposed to rolling the gun into your body, definitely try it out. I mean, you'll be able to do that because this is a fully ambi mount, but there's a lot of advantages to rolling the gun into your body, having more points of contact versus rotating the gun out. One of the benefits of rotating the gun out is I can see more on the left side while my right eye is obviously picking up the dot, but the gun's also kind of floating out there. There's going to be, it's going to be a little harder to control the recoil. You have less points of contact, so less point of aim, less consistent in finding the dot. So there's a reason pretty much everybody is rolling the gun into the body so they can kind of bring it in. And honestly, sometimes I get better recoil management running an offset, really bringing the gun into the body versus keeping the gun at 12 o'clock, especially when I start running a taller scope where my head starts to kind of just come off of the stock. So you can get it for the Delta Point, Aim Point. The RMR hole pattern is kind of convenient because there are other companies that are manufacturing dots that are compatible. So this is a Holosun 50 something. They're kind of pulling a Safariland in how they name their products, but whatever. But basically I can then run this optic on the RMR hole pattern. The RMR hole pattern though is not ambidextrous, and that's just due to how the screws and just everything going on. So that is going to be right side only, but eventually we will make one for the other side based on how many of you guys actually want that. As far as what I would recommend for running an offset, one of my favorites is honestly the Delta Point. It's also very inexpensive. You can get this whole setup for Well, now it's broken. But you can get this full setup for around, I want to say $400 with the offset mount. So when you start looking at putting, a good set of iron sights on the gun, you're looking at 280, plus for a good set of irons, which are going to be slow compared to a red dot. But then I can get this guy and I'm good to go. And it's fast. I can treat it like a primary optic. I can leave my scope on 3 power. I can leave it on 6 power, or maybe I have an ACOG that's a fixed 4 or a 3.5. And I can literally run this as my offset. Now, obviously, one thing to take into consideration is this is a open emitter optic. So rain and debris can get in there, and then I'm going to lose, the ability to run this piece of equipment. If I had something like an aim point, like this T2, not going to be as much of a problem because it's enclosed, it's more protected, it is heavier, but it's also more durable. So I can actually drop it, and it won't break. No, this one didn't break. This is more, it's more durable than that. So those are some considerations for you guys. I do recommend running the Delta Point. I've been running that on, as an offset on my guns for a long time. But then also the T2 as well. And there's the SRO is another one. It's on one of these guns here, and that's been pretty awesome as well. A couple other things, nice, fun little bonus knowledge. Some of the scope mounts out there, the 193s, that's on a scoop up here in the front, like the ScalarWorks and also the LaRue, will actually fit our offset mount underneath because of how slim and low profile I wanted to make the mount. Some of the mounts out there are kind of fat, or they're big, or they have a QD, and then I can't fit it underneath. But we made this really slim and really small for the reason and for the purpose of being able to fit it underneath certain mounts if you really do want to consolidate, or maybe you have a really short gun and you don't want to put this forward on the rail. Another thing to think about is you're like mounting things on the rail. You want to make sure you have a good rail. Obviously upper receiver, those are usually pretty good, but you want to make sure you have a rail that's not going to shift, it's not going to twist, something that's going to maintain zero pretty good if you are going to be mounting your offset forward on the rail itself. So if you are running a 193, pretty cool little combo you can get going on here. Same with like the LaRue, and there's probably some other ones as well where you can actually fit the mount underneath. So that's pretty rad. One more thing, 'cause some of you guys are probably wondering, why is this just a super flush rail mount and it's not QD? Well, obviously running a QD is going to make the mount more expensive for you guys, the consumers, but also there's really no reason, in my opinion, to run a QD offset. This is not something I need to be moving or taking off of my gun constantly. This is something that really stays on there. It also keeps it a lot more flush, so on certain guns where you have a charging handle on the left side, like a SCAR, or maybe you're a lefty and you're positioning on the other side and you've got something like an AK or something weird that has a charging handle and you're not being normal running like an AR, having something that's more flush and is more low profile is going to just be better for that. So it also keeps this mount very inexpensive versus having a big fat QD system of some sort. So I've never really needed to quickly take one of these off or constantly transfer them to different guns. So we just ditched the QD altogether to maintain a slimmer, smaller profile, but it also means it's more cost effective for you guys.
So there's a lot of
Something I like to do to get reps in on finding my sight picture is obviously a pretty big deal when you're shooting. You only shoot as fast as you can see your sights, and so aligning your sights consistently every time once I present the gun to a target, that's going to ultimately determine how soon I can fire. So a drill that I like to do, and I have a standard I'm working on for this, is I start the drill with my optic on a magnification. For this, I will be on 3 power. Bring the gun up. I'm going to take a headshot here at 25-30 meters, roll the gun over to the red dot, take a body shot, back to the scope, headshot, back to the dot, and so on for 6 total shots. So it's obviously a very unrealistic drill, people would say, and has no purpose. But what it's doing is it's isolating out the reps of finding sight pictures and rolling the gun nice and fast. Because ultimately what we should be doing is able to run this gun as fast as we would in a video game, where when I hit right stick or the little like arrow buttons to one side, I immediately turn to that optic, and it's perfect and it's consistent every single time. That's how we should be with our equipment. So I'm gonna run this drill, show you guys what it looks like. This is one that I do to train both of my optics and just be more familiar and aware of them. So it's 3 shots to the head with the scope. I'm gonna do it on 3. I can also do it on 6, and then I can check times and see what's faster. But in this case, I like 3 power. It looks good. Actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll do 3. And then red dot for body. Let's do this. Alrighty. So So 3 and 3. I don't know the total time because this is subsonic 300 blackout, but timer's saying 484, but that's saying 4 shots recorded, so I don't know. But looks like I'm clean. In fact, the red dot shots are a little cleaner. Not bad. Let's speed it up. Woohoo, boy. Sped it up a little bit there. And no time recorded. What happens is these subs. Ah, where'd my marker go? Oh, I got it. Whew. Oh, boy. All right. We got 1, 2, 3. Those are my headshots on 3x. And then 1, 2, 3 for my shots with the offset. Pretty fast. So if you don't have 200, 300, 400 meters to train, which is where these scopes start to really shine, where you can start to range stuff and you can start to really engage out to distance a little further than, say, a red dot. What I like to do is I'll give myself a sandwich target. So I'll give myself really small targets to engage, where if I had a red dot, it's, you know, could I make it work? Yes, I could. But would my consistency be good as far as accuracy, taking those, you know, risky shots on a low percentage? So what I've done here is I've taken IPSC ovals and I've just sandwiched together some very small targets. And so from here, about 40-ish meters, it's very beneficial to have this scope on 3 power, 4 power, 5 power. And this is where you can kind of play around and see, you know, what works for you and, you know, what works under certain conditions. And then I also have some closer targets strewn about, where obviously I'm going to run red dot on these guys up close because it is going to be faster than having to throttle from 1 power to 5 power and then back to 1 power. So for this drill, I'm actually going to go left to right. So it's going to be far, low percentage, close, low percentage, close, far, and then really close. So also making sure my throttle control as I'm, you know, flipping between my optics is on point, and I'm consistent in finding my sights, but then I'm also fast enough at clearing through all of these 2 shots per. So let's do it. Bad follow through. Otherwise, felt pretty good about those shots. And that's on 4 power. So these guys on 4 power, solid. Boom, boom, get slayed.
Alright, I'm going in front. Get one of those tight shots, or get one of those shots I did earlier.